Hey, good morning. So this is Brad Miller, technical agronomist with DeKalb Agro for Northern Ohio. And for today's agronomy update, we're going to talk about weed control. And there's a few facts I wanted to go over with you. First off, you may not know that without a weed control program, weeds can rob at least 80% of the yield potential of the crop. And even with our weed control programs that we have today across the Midwest, uh, we still experience about a 40% yield loss in our crops with weeds that escape. And so another interesting fact that I found is that with weed control alone, the absence of weed control, the effect of the weeds on those crops, especially on soybeans, has a higher impact on yield potential than insects, animal damage, and diseases combined. So obviously, weed control is very important. So our five big weeds that we deal with that are here in Ohio, the most troublesome weeds are common ragweed, giant ragweed, mare's tail, palmer amaranth, and water hemp. Those are the five that we're really trying to get control of. So with the Extend Flex system, we have a lot of flexibility. We have the ability to use Extendamax in the burn down to provide excellent weed control, but also give us a little bit of residual control as well. Also, with Extend Flex beans, we have the flexibility in crop to use either Extendamax herbicide, Roundup, or Liberty. So a lot of flexibility there to control these weeds. So I wanted to show you a few weeds that we have coming up here today. And this is conventional till corn stubble. So here we have some giant ragweed. This is cotyledon stage. So you can see here the two cotyledon leaves, spoon-shaped leaves, and then we got the first two sets of true leaves coming out on this giant ragweed. As you can see, it's got a good start, and ragweed's going to grow really fast. Uh, and it's kind of interesting here that this is an old ragweed plant from last summer. And of course, this plant fell down here, and all the seed is right here, and that's all the giant ragweed that we have germinating. And then over here, we actually have some common lamb's quarters that's starting to come up. So I'll show you what this common lamb's quarter looks like. Again, this is seedling stage. So you can see it's got the two longer narrow leaves, those are the cotyledon leaves. Then we have at least two pair of true leaves already growing. And it's a lighter green plant, has lots of, if you look on the underside of leaves, it's got a white mealy type appearance. So that's common lamb's quarters. So it's been warm enough and enough moisture to get the common lamb's quarter and giant ragweed growing. One thing I found interesting is right here, this is straw from giant foxtail. As you dig through here, you'll find that there are no foxtail germinating yet. So it has not been warm enough for the foxtail to germinate. So it's kind of interesting to me because we've got this early planting window going on. We got soybeans being put in the ground, but you know what? Not putting much corn in the ground yet. And there's a reason for that. Is soybeans tend to hold or just tend to tolerate cold weather a little bit better. And I think the weeds are telling us that too. You know, we got the broadleaves growing early, but the grasses haven't quite started yet. So nature can tell us a lot that way. The other thing that's out here is this purple dead nettle. So purple dead nettle is a winter annual. Of course, this germinated back in September and grew throughout the winter. It actually stays green under the snow. And then when the snow melts in the spring and things warm up, the purple dead nettle starts growing really fast and starts flowering. So this is a weed that we need to try to control in the fall with a nice burn down like Extendamax with Roundup. Get good control. That way we don't have to deal with it in the spring. So that's the weeds that we wanted to talk about. And I guess the next thing we wanted to address a little bit is planting. So we've got an early window where a lot of guys have tried putting some beans in the ground early. Planting conditions were just really ideal. Nice warm soils, hitting that 50-degree mark and good moisture in the ground. So the question often comes up, if I'm going to plant beans early, which soybeans should I plant first? The early maturity, the moderate, middle maturity, or the later maturity? And what you want to do, what our data shows, is that the early beans should be planted early because that gives them a chance to get better plant height, get more nodes on that stem, and of course, more nodes translates to more flowers and more pods before the day length starts changing. So you want to plant your early beans early, and if you want to plant some fuller season beans early, you can do that too. Then as we get into the middle of our planting window, you probably want to switch to your fuller season beans. And then towards the end of your planting window, you want to switch to your medium maturity beans. That way, because they're planted a little bit later, they still have enough time to reach maturity, and the grain isn't too wet. And so we have a data slide here that you can see some data from 2018 that we did with early, mid, and late season beans planted at early timing, mid timing, and later in the spring. And the data demonstrates that too, that the early beans early gives it the best chance for yield. The fuller season beans can be planted either early or mid season, but the best timing for that mid maturity bean is towards the end of the planting window. Okay, as you remember in our last agronomy update, we talked about planting depth, more so on corn. Definitely want to focus on planting depth for soybeans because we are planting beans quite early this year, and planting depth has even more importance than ever. The important thing with soybeans on planting depth, typically we're going about an inch deep on soybeans. Well, when we're in this early part of April, we probably want to be more at an inch and a half to inch and 3/4. And again, the idea is number one, that you're planting into moisture, but also that layer of soil above that seed, remember to access an insulation barrier for that cold air, because this air temperature is going to fluctuate up and down. We're not going to stay warm. There's going to be a time here, probably before Mother's Day, that we're going to get cold again. So we want to make sure that seed is protected with a nice insulation barrier. So inch and a half to inch and 3/4. Now let's talk about seeding rates on beans. So when we're planting under a quote unquote normal early planting date, we're talking like the last week of April into the first week of May. So we go with our standard seeding rate. It's probably going to be lower than as we get into later May, where we say increase your seeding rate by 10%. And then if we get into June, another 10%, and so on. Well, now, since we're talking about planting beans in April, we're going to take your normal seeding rate that you would typically plant that first week of May and subtract 10%. We don't need as many seeds per acre because these beans are going to get out of the ground. They're going to be the first of the soybeans out of the ground. And that's going to give the plants plenty of time to branch out, put more pods on those branches instead of just the main stem. So we're going to be able to make up yield that way and save some on our seeding rate. Obviously, with early planted beans, seed treatment is very important. Keep that fungicide protection.